Okay, Walt Whitman. Let's first ask ourselves, what's Walt Whitman's rank among poets? How great a poet is he?
Well, I think it's common practice within academia to say he's at the very, very top. And oftentimes I doubt academic assessments. But I think in this case, I'm kind of inclined to agree. I think Whitman is a stellar poet. He is a relevant poet. His style is, it's both simple and elegant at the same time. You don't need to crack your head like a walnut to try to interpret it. But just that skill with language and the passion with which he, this language for him was a celebration. It was almost, how do you say? Well, neither here nor there, but yes, I think Whitman is a stellar poet, one of the top poets. I know that Harold Bloom, who I mentioned quite a bit, was very favorable toward, actually said that he was, I believe he was like America's answer to Shakespeare almost. I mean, as Shakespeare was the premier poet across the pond, poet in the world, really. I don't really think there are many poets ranked as highly as Walt Whitman.
Okay, good. I would even like to go a little bit further. So the top two poets, probably, they're not the top two poets for me.
Yes.
There's a lot of subjectivity involved in poetry.
Of course.
But it does seem like the top two poets are Shakespeare and Homer.
Yes.
Now, as far as which of those two is better, you could say Homer is better because he had a 2,300-year run.
Of course.
Where he was the top poet.
Right.
But then you could also say, well, not many people were living during those 2,300 years. So if you then want to calculate it by how many people lived after Homer who failed to supersede him.
Yes.
Versus how many poets after Shakespeare, how many people lived after Shakespeare that failed to supersede him, the numbers would be much more equal.
I agree. Yes.
Shakespeare might even have more people.
Yes.
At least up to the year, let's say, in order to be the greatest poet of all time, you at least have to be born before maybe 1900 or 1950 because It's hard to get that perspective.
Right.
Like if we want to say any poet after 1950, there's always the danger that they're just going to appeal to the sensibilities that exist in our current time period.
A poet has to endure the test of time, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. They got to appeal.
So many poets as whatever their merit, not enough time has elapsed to truly say that they will endure as the years go by.
Yeah. Okay, so if Shakespeare and Homer are 1 and 2, I would. Well, let's at least propose candidates for third best poet. Candidates would definitely be Dante, Goethe, Milton.
Chaucer, of course.
Right.
Not necessarily in terms of, I am not a tremendous fan of Chaucer, but just in terms of influence. He was heavily influential in Shakespeare. We have to bear that in mind as well.
But I can't now. I'm not going to put Chaucer that high up there.
All right, what about Don Quixote?
No, poetry.
Oh, I'm sorry, poetry.
Poetry. Yeah, so Dante, Milton, Goethe would definitely be candidates for the third slot, number 3.
Yes, of course.
Maybe Virgil. But I kind of really do want to put Whitman in the third slot.
I'm also going to propose Lucretius, simply for the, in terms of influence. Especially, there's so much of Whitman's poetry that's Lucretian. I'll say that right off the bat.
No, but I wouldn't put Lucretius as the third greatest poet of all time.
Perhaps as one of the third most influential poets.
You got to remember, I'm pretty sure the Lucretius's manuscript was not discovered until very late.
No, that's very true. But again, there's so much of... I bring up Lucretius primarily because we were discussing Whitman at this time.
Okay, but anyway, I do want to put Whitman as number 3.
Okay.
Because... Well, number one, you got to be honest, he is easily translated. So yes. Goethe, Dante, and Milton, they're not easily translated.
I've heard it said that if you try to translate Shakespeare, for instance, you are degrading Shakespeare because it's not that original tongue.
Well, any great poet.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, that's like any poet. So that it is hard to be a little objective, whatever that means, trying to compare this poet that is very easily translatable because he doesn't use meter. So you do have to keep that in mind.
Sure.
But number two, when you look at so many poets in the 20th century, so many poets refer to Whitman, so many poets take time to really praise him.
True.
Even one of my favorite poets, Adonis, who's a Syrian poet, even Adonis, Whitman is the one poet that Adonis picks out as the poet he likes to talk about.
Wasn't Whitman an influence on Leopardi?
Probably, but I'm not. Actually, I was reading a little bit of Leopardi 2 days ago, but I don't know that much about. I don't know enough about Leopardi. And then even Hart Crane that I'm reading right now, of course, really I think kind of even takes the Whitman hero worship a bit too far. But the one thing you got going for Whitman is he really revolutionized poetry unlike any other poet.
Sure.
It's fair to say that Latin poetry never really even experienced a revolution. During that whole, let's say, 600 years that Latin literature, 600 or 700 years of Latin literature was really great, it never really underwent a strong revolution. And you could even say the same thing about English up until Walt Whitman.
Sure.
The free verse movement begins with Whitman, and so that is definitely a fact that he does have going for him.
Sure, of course.
And then secondly, the enthusiasm. I mean, so many poets don't write with enthusiasm.
Every line, I think, every poem is infused with this very obvious passion. It's almost like a celebration.
Well, I'm not going to go that far.
Well, I know. Well, I think that when
for example, the drum taps poems, they don't have that much enthusiasm in them.
Perhaps not as. There's so much of.
All right. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, we do also have to point out that maybe the one defect in Whitman is he doesn't have super imagery. Okay.
Now, how do you mean by super imagery?
All right. So let me get some lines let me get some great images.
Now, I know that Whitman's language is, for example, not mythically derived, if you will.
Well, I don't.
He draws upon, I guess, what we would call the everyday, the mundane, extractions from the world around him, not necessarily these vast religious or mythological systems, if you will.
Okay, so here's a good line from Shelley. The beam. This is from Alastor or the Spirit of Solitude. Right. Okay, so. The beams of sunset hung their rainbow hues high, mid the shifting domes of sheeted spray that canopied his path o'er the waist deep. So you're not. I don't think you're going to find a line like that in Whitman.
What we're dealing with Shelley is sublime poetry, sublime imagery. You're not going to get that sublimity really in Whitman. I don't think that's a discredit to Whitman. I mean, he derived his value and his poetry from the everyday, the mundane, the world around him. He didn't have to reach beyond the world around him, the physicality, materiality, for the subject of his poetry, if you will. He wasn't necessarily. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that says it basically. I don't think we're finding much of the sublime, so to speak. What do you think?
I'm gonna just. I got to think about that. Sure. I got to think about it.
When I read a lot of Shelley and the Romantic poets, it almost reminds me of a Wagnerian opera, for instance. You're not going to get that same. I don't derive the same experience from Whitman. Historically, I've always liked the high romantic, the sublime, the mythological, etc.
Okay.
But Whitman is really the first writer I've come across that so celebrates the basic, fundamental world around him. Basic human activity.
What about Wordsworth?
Well, that's it. Well, hold on. So I have one thing.
you were saying that Whitman celebrates the world around us.
Right. He sees so people aren't necessarily engaged in heroic deeds to be celebrated.
Oh yeah, and he says that in his preface that I'm not interested in kings and battles and that sort of thing.
I mean, he does look at some heroic deeds. Like there's, for example, there's this one piece about the death of a firefighter in a collapsing building, for instance. It has heroic overtones to it. People trying to unearth him, trying to dig him out from this fiery wreckage, for instance. There's a heroic act where he shelters a runaway slave, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
But these are like the mundane heroics, and I don't mean that in a negative sense. These are the mundane heroics. This isn't like, some fantastical quest for, like heroic fantasy, for instance.
Okay, all right. So he doesn't have the heroics.
Right. Well, I mean, again, he doesn't have the fantastical, high romantic heroics, but he does have those more mundane heroics, the everyday heroics, if you will.
Okay. All right.
Kyle is moving aside one of his cats who's threatening to pat across the keyboard.
Okay. Let's go ahead and start talking about the poem itself.
Let's do it.
So we're gonna talk about Song of Myself in its entirety. We're not gonna read it, of course.
Right.
It would take too long. Sure. We're just gonna look at the themes. We're gonna try to understand the themes. Try to encapsulate the whole poem into a small set of ideas. So I've gone through. I've identified maybe 40, 45 themes, but there are 4 big themes that under which a lot of sub themes fall. So let's talk about the first big theme, which is everyone and everything is good.
Yes.
Okay, so let's get some examples of this theme.
Let me say that it's not necessarily reducible to a moral good versus a moral evil. Ultimately, all evil and all good, quote unquote, are subsumed or sublimated beneath this overall, what would you say, significance. All of these different things are equally good for the sake of poetry, living, advancing something. Well, let's keep going.
Okay, so the section 39, the friendly and flowing savage, who is he? Is he waiting for civilization or past it and mastering it? Is he some Southwesterner raised outdoors? He goes on, and then behavior lawless as snowflakes, words simple as grass, uncombed head, laughter, and naivete, slow-stepping feet, common features. Okay, all right. So he...
it also says common features, common modes, and emanations. Once again, he is deriving his poetry from the common, the mundane, the experiential. This is something that most, if not all, people can participate in.
Yeah.
Versus this, a very, very high, very noble, very romantic heroism, if you will.
Okay. So here he's praising the noble savage.
Yes.
The implication here is that this is a good person. It's a person worthy of our attention.
Of course.
All right. Let's do we have another example of this theme? Okay. All right. Section 43. All right. Section 43. Towards the end, it cannot fall. Oh, is that a typo? Shouldn't it be it cannot fail? Let's look this up. I think this is a typo here.
I think that's a typo.
It cannot fail the young man. Whitman. Yeah, that's a typo. Okay. It cannot fail the young man who died and was buried, nor the young woman who died and was put by his side, nor the little child that peeped in at the door and then drew back and was never seen again, nor the old man, and I'm just going to summarize here. So it cannot fail the old man, him in the poorhouse, the numberless slaughtered and wrecked, nor the sacks merely floating with open mouths for food to slip in, nor anything in the earth. Okay, so none of these things can fail. I'm pretty sure he's saying there, the implication is they're good, they're worthy of our attention.
Well, in which case I would kind of modify the everyone is good
designation to everything is good.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, we have a certain scale here. I mean, we start, of course, with life and death. We go to existence beyond the human, out into different galaxies, space in general. And all of these things are good. What do we mean when we say good in this case?
Just worthy of our...
No, I think you've got it there. Worthy of our attention, worthy of our finding something of value. There's one line in I don't know if it's Song Myself. I think it precedes that, where he's just speaking of different details. One of which is, for instance, the individual in a medical tent, a soldier in a medical tent, having a limb severed and dropping into the pail.
Okay.
This is good. Not in
Okay. So it follows that because he believes everything is good, he also believes death is good.
That's correct, yes.
Death is not bad. So, Section 7, has anyone supposed it lucky to be born? I hasten to inform him or her it is just as lucky to die, and I know it.
Right.
I pass death with the dying and birth with the new-washed babe, and am not contained between my hat and boots. And peruse manifold objects, no two alike, and everyone good. Okay, so that's pretty explicit.
Yes.
Okay, so death is not bad, at least. All right, and then let's move on to the sub-theme. So because everyone is good, this includes also, of course, the blacks, which in 1855 was a minority position. You'd agree with that, right?
Yes, no,
yeah.
I concur.
Okay, so Section 13, the Negro holds firmly the reins of his 4 horses. The block swags underneath on its tied-over chain. The Negro that drives the long dray of the stone yard, steady and tall he stands, poised on one leg on the string piece. His blue shirt exposes his ample neck and breast and loosens over his hip band. His glance is calm and commanding. He tosses the slouch of his hat away from his forehead. The sun falls on his crispy hair and mustache, falls on the black of his polished and perfect limbs.
This language conveys a heroic stance, a heroic bearing, a heroic demeanor. Which is how he grants nobility to the Negro. See what else.
Also, I'm pretty sure, like I heard a lecture once, now again, this was about 15 years ago.
Sure.
That many Americans in the 1850s, they were anti-slavery, but they were not necessarily, they didn't believe that the races were equal.
That's correct.
Only John Brown, this lecturer said that it was really only John Brown that believed that. But we can also see that Walt Whitman as well.
I would also point out Emerson and Thoreau as parties who were abolitionists and who embraced the equality of, black, white, etc.
Yeah, okay. Okay, all right. So we got he's not racist. Now, he also believes in harmony between the sexes.
Yes. And there are different, this harmony takes many different forms between the sexes, including sexual, for instance.
Yeah. Okay, so in Section 11, this is the section where he says there are 28 young men, they're bathing.
Yes.
And there's one woman. Okay, so 28 young men bathe by the shore, 28 young men and also friendly, 28 years of womanly life and also lonesome. And then he brings in the woman. She owns the fine house by the rise of the bank. She hides handsome and richly dressed aft the blinds of the window. Which of the young man does she like best? And then later on, she goes down and she plays with them.
I want to point out one line. It says, which of the young men does she like the best? The homeliest of them is beautiful to her, which I think is a very, it's very suitable to Whitman's thinking. What else?
Hold on, I might be a little wrong here. So, she continues to watch them
yes.
from inside her home.
Yes.
And then the 29th bather comes, who's also a man.
Right. Now, I'm envisioning I'm envisioning a spinster in all of this, not necessarily a young woman.
Okay. Yeah. But I'm starting to think that maybe this section doesn't support my thesis of harmony between the sexes.
Well, I will say, it seems to me that Whitman is using the perspective of a woman to indulge his own appreciation for men on the page. What do you think?
I mean, that's possible.
Mm-hmm.
That's possible. All right, so let's. Is there? Well, let's just go with anti-sexism,
okay,
because that's kind of that's very similar to this theme.
Sure.
Right, so anti-sexist. Okay, section 21. I am the poet of the woman the same as the man, and I say it is as great to be a woman as to be a man, and I say there is nothing greater than the mother of men. So that's very clear.
Absolutely, of course.
Yeah. So again, he's ahead of his time here.
Yes.
With the anti-sexism. And once again, I really think that this falls under the super theme, which is everyone or everything is good.
Right, of course.
All right, so let's move on to the lauding of low professions. Okay, the low professions. I'm having trouble finding this. Okay, all right, lauding low professions. Okay, section 12. The butcher boy puts off his killing clothes or sharpens his knife at the stall in the market. I loiter, enjoying his repartee and his shuffle and breakdown. Blacksmith with grimed and hairy chest environ the anvil. I got to interrupt myself here. Environ the anvil. Great use. Great use of language right there. Don't you think?
I concur.
Even killing clothes. Maybe in 1855 it was more of a common word, but today...
I think he's just trying to make very stark the fact that the butcher boy is tasked with killing with a violent act, and Whitman sees value in this. He sees that this too is good. He's not going to use euphemisms, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to use very direct language. Yeah.
Okay, so each has his main sledge. They are all out. There's a great heat in the fire. From the cinder-strewed threshold, I follow their movements. The lithe sheer of their wrists...
Waists.
Oh, okay. The lithe sheer of their waists plays even with their massive arms. Another great line.
Of course.
Overhand the hammers swing, overhand so low, overhand so sure.
Mm-hmm.
They do not hasten. Each man hits in his place. Okay, so again, he doesn't come out and say it. He doesn't come out and say, these professions are good, but the implication's there.
He manages to find positive qualities in each and every profession.
Yeah.
There is deliberation in these, with these blacksmiths, there's deliberation. There is accuracy. There is patience.
Mm-hmm.
And these are laudable qualities.
Yeah. And I also think this section also supports the theme, which we'll get to later, that the body is superior to the mind.
Yes. Or at the very least, equal with the body.
Right.
There is a line that says, it may actually be right around here, I worship the body, I worship the mind, or I worship the soul.
Mm-hmm. I'm the poet of the body.
Yeah, I believe that's it, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Also, I'd like to point out, I like the juxtapositioning of the task of the butcher boy, his job, and how that is juxtaposed with his repartee, his shovel, his breakdown.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now let's move on to this. This is one of the more difficult themes.
Yes. Okay.
That he contains everything.
Yes, this is, yeah.
All right, so he says this again and again. So let's go ahead and get some examples.
Mm-hmm.
All right. In me, the caresser of... What section am I at here? 13. Okay. In me, the caresser of life, forever moving, backward as well as forward slewing. Is that another typo, slewing? Does he really say slewing?
Backward as well as forward. I'm not sure.
Let's make sure that we're
let's verify that.
I've got a scanned version that's got a lot of.
I think we can make a certain declaration. If something is expressive of life, it is then good. Whether this can involve pleasure, it could involve pain, it could involve death. But if there is some expression of life and living, it is therefore good. So perhaps good and goodness and life are synonymous.
No, I don't know about that. Say that again. Re-encapsulate your what you said.
We're looking when we deal with the idea of goodness in Whitman, when he says that everything is good, we kind of butt our heads up against certain images, like the fireman trapped in the burning building, or the surgeon severing a patient's limb. How are these things good, if you will? These seem like evils. But I think what Whitman says, when it says, "In me, the caresser of life wherever moving," I think that pain and pleasure and industry and frustration and sex and death are all modalities of life, of people, of industry. They are therefore good.
No, I think he expresses the thesis. So, for example, with that passage we just read, where the in section 12, with the butcher boy and the blacksmith, what he's doing is, normally in the year 1850, you just wouldn't pay attention to these people. There were a few poets that I forget the poet's name, but there was a poet that wrote like an epic poem about the working class.
Really?
Yeah, I forget the poet's name, but so there were poets that did do that. But just by bringing attention to these people, so for example, even though Shelley was amazingly liberal and all of that, I can't. And I've read all of Shelley's poems. I can't really recall a poem where he talks about a low worker.
Right.
So I think just by describing these low professions and using these positive adjectives, sharpens or positive adjectives and verbs. He's saying that they're good.
Well, I think that Whitman was so devoted to an analysis and immortalizing of industry, of human industry. So when we look at the butcher boy using his knife, butchering meat, that is an example of industry. If we look at wherever you look, sex can be an industry, for instance. War can be an industry. If something is industrious, if it's an activity, perhaps we're not dealing with passive life here. If it's an actual activity meant laboring towards some goal, some design, I think then it can be said that is going to go good.
All right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so we still haven't really got our heads around contains all. Okay, so again, in me the caresser of life forever moving, backward as well as forward slewing, two niches aside and junior bending, not a person or object missing, absorbing all to myself. That's very clear.
Very much.
Absorbing all to myself.
Not a person or object is to be omitted in this.
Let's get another one. Okay, section 15. The living sleep for their time, the dead sleep for their time, the old husband sleeps by his wife, and the young husband sleeps by his wife, and these tend inward to me, and I tend outward to them.
Yes.
And such as it is to be of these more or less I am, and of these one and all I weave the song of myself.
All of these objects and all of these people. You and I have commented, Kyle, that Whitman often employs a format of like a list, if you will.
Yeah.
And that is most appropriate to capturing as many instances of people, of objects, of phenomena as possible. And that's why it's especially, and that's why it succeeds so well in this.
Yes. And then section 16, the basic structure of this section is, he starts out with saying, I am of old and young, of the foolish as much as the wise.
Yes.
And then he lists all of these other things. The southerner as soon as a northerner, a Yankee, a Kentuckian, a boatman at home in on Canadian snowshoes or up in the bush, comrade of Californians, comrade of Rasmans. So he's everything.
He really goes for the meat of it in the very last two lines. Farmer, mechanic, artist, gentleman, sailor, Quaker, prisoner, fancyman, rowdy, lawyer, physician, priest.
Mm-hmm.
Bring it all together, as many different occupations as he can. It's all. I mean, it makes me think of what is it? Taylor, Tinker, Soldier, Spy. That phrase.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, I think with the theme, he contains everything.
Mm-hmm. So who is he then?
Well, here's another good line.
Okay.
This is from section 20.
Sure.
In all people I see myself.
Yes.
None more and not one a barleycorn less. And the good or bad I say of myself, I say of them.
Yes.
So I really think what he's trying to say with is just gets back to that theme. Everything, everyone, and everyone is good.
Right, of course.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I guess I've already sold you on that.
What's this though? I like this. I know I am deathless.
Right. Okay. So this is one of the unclear passages that
Sure.
I really can't encapsulate it too well.
Well, let's go ahead and just read those 3 lines real fast.
Okay. I know I am deathless. I know this orbit of mine cannot be swept by a carpenter's compass. I know I shall not pass like a child's curlicue,
Yeah.
cut with a burnt stick at night. Also, I know I am august. I do not trouble my spirit to vindicate itself or be understood.
Mm-hmm.
I see the elementary laws, never apologize. Now, okay, I do got to say that I'm not all that impressed with his philosophical musings.
Well, how would you? What labels, what designations would you apply to his philosophical musings? So, for example, we can agree on materialist, for instance. What else?
Well, maybe we should postpone that.
Okay.
Because let's try to postpone the difficult themes.
That's fine.
Let's deal with the themes that we understand first.
Okay. I will want to come back when we do that. I will want to come back to one line, which is, to me, the convergent objects of the universe perpetually flow. And that will tie in with what I think his philosophical label should be.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now another theme is he's accepting of other people's sins.
Yes. Non-judgmental, if you will.
Yeah. Okay. Section 22. What blurt is this about virtue and about vice? Evil propels me, and reform of evil propels me.
Mm-hmm.
I stand indifferent. My gait is no fault finder's or rejector's gait. I moisten the roots of all that is grown.
Yes.
Okay, so he's accepting other people's sins. This also ties into the theme of iconoclasm, which we're going to get into.
Sure.
And briefly, he's iconoclastic because, well, first off, his poetry is iconoclastic,
right,
that he doesn't use the rhyme and meter.
Right. I will say there's some, I don't know if it's conscious of, I don't know if I use from appropriation, that sounds so accusatory, but when it says, evil propels me and reform of evil, there's this theological notion. Everything that happens, good and evil, is of the same value to God. And so it seems to me that when Whitman is saying, evil propels me, reform of evil propels me, etc., he's, like I said, I don't want to say appropriation, but it's like he's taking that same perspective on good and on evil that you would usually find in theism, really, Christianity.
I don't know about that. I mean, are you saying, like, Christianity viewed good and evil as...
No. From the divine perspective. You've heard the cliche, everything is part of God's plan.
Right.
Everything serves a purpose in God's plan. Mm-hmm. I almost feel like Whitman is mirroring that perspective, if you will. Not toward an actual God or some deity, but about himself.
All right. All right. Okay. All right. So he's accepting. Okay. Well, let's just go ahead and move on to the iconoclasm.
That's fine.
Okay. So of course he's iconoclastic because because he has these non-mainstream beliefs, let's call them.
Yes.
These low professions are good. He's his poetry is iconoclastic, and he doesn't use meter and rhyme.
Sure.
He exalts the senses much more than other people do.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get some more iconoclasm.
Go right ahead.
Okay. So this is from section 23. It doesn't say I, but it starts, and beat the gong of revolt and stop with fugitives and them that plot and conspire.
I'm so sorry, where is this?
This is right here.
Okay.
Yeah. So he beats the gong of revolt and stops with fugitives and them that plot and conspire.
Right.
All right. Okay, here's another. We're on section 24. Divine am I, inside and out. This is also belongs to another theme where he talks about he's amazing. But we'll not only, he's not just saying that, like the pantheist, the God is everywhere, and that includes myself.
Right.
I think later on he does say some pretty arrogant things, but remember, he had a right to be arrogant.
Well, you mentioned pantheism. When you say arrogant, do you mean identifying himself with the world, with that pantheistic deity? Because that's what I'm getting from here.
Well, let me just finish reading the passage. Okay. So, divine am I, inside and out, and make holy whatever I touch or am touched from. The scent of these armpits, aroma finer than prayer. This head more than churches, Bibles, and all the creeds.
Yes.
Okay, so that's iconoclasm. That's going against the mainstream religion.
Churches, Bibles, and creeds point to some transcendent deity. They point to something else. The armpit aroma finer than prayer. That is, I agree. That is.
Okay, so section 32 is also. This is the section about animals. I could turn and live with animals. They are so placid and self-contained. I stand and look at them long and long. I don't know. Maybe that's not as iconoclastic as I thought it was, but there's a little bit of iconoclasm there with his love of animals. I don't know how much. I don't know all that much about how people viewed animals back then, but I know Descartes viewed them as machines.
Well, Descartes was actually a big supporter of vivisection.
Yeah, but I don't know if Descartes was mainstream in that regard. Okay. All right, so here's section... Oh, this is, I think, 33. This is my favorite section. But this is towards the end of 33. So I am a free companion. I bivouac by invading watchfires. I turned the bridegroom out of bed and stay with the bride myself.
Right.
I tightened her all night to my thighs and lips. Okay, so that's iconoclasm.
That's speaking against the standards of marriage, monogamy, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Sexuality within marriage, etc.
Right. Also, I gotta point out that I should have really mentioned this in the introduction. So Whitman, so many people like Whitman, but he has this obstacle in that I don't think many people really like his ideas about sensuality. I don't think many people say, yeah, I agree with Walt Whitman's views on sensuality. I don't think many people do that, but yet they like him anyway because of the poetry.
Yes, no, I agree.
I've never read anyone say, I used to be a Puritan, but then I read Whitman and I became a libertine. I've never heard anyone say that. So it's kind of shameful because in the 1860s, 70s, Whitman had trouble getting traction because people feared these dangerous ideas. But it turns out that people weren't really influenced by them.
Well, regarding his iconoclasm and just how outrageous some people found his work to be, so I'm reading from a Washington Post article online. Leaves of Grass was banned from libraries across the United States. It cost Whitman his government job. He'd been working as a clerk at the Interior Department, and when the boss found his copy of Leaves of Grass, he was so outraged by the sexually suggestive passages that he fired the poet.
Yeah, and
I can't help but admire these instances where poets will sacrifice, or they'll sacrifice public esteem, their jobs, etc., for their work, for their art, for their standards, and that's always admirable. We don't really see that much nowadays because
there's so much freedom of speech.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But
Well, actually, no. Let me take that back. I mean, if you write a poem about like Bin Laden as a hero,
true,
or Vladimir Putin, you're gonna, and if you're in a certain type of job, you could easily lose it.
If it's pornographic, for instance, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay, all right. So we got the iconoclasm. Now, another sub-theme of the iconoclasm is things are not what they seem. So, no, I really only have one instance of this. So, section 19. This is the press of a bashful hand. This the float and odor of hair. This the touch of my lips to yours. This the murmur of yearning. This the far off depth and height reflecting my own face. This the thoughtful merge of myself and the outlet again. And by the way, I love the way he omits the word is in that passage. The ellipses. I really like that.
So let's talk about it. Now you assigned the designation "things are not what they seem" to that particular quatrain.
Yeah. So
tell me about that.
Yeah. So he's kind of. Well, we don't even really know what this refers to. So let's back up to the beginning. This is the meal equally set. This the meat for natural hunger. It is for the wicked just as the same as the righteous. So that's the theme of everyone is good.
Yeah.
I make appointments with all. I will not have a single person slighted or left away. The kept woman, sponger, thief are hereby invited. The heavy-lipped slave, so there's your anti-racism, is invited. The venerally is invited. There shall be no difference between them and the rest.
Now, let me make a quick comment on that. So we had just discussed that where that one passage where Whitman is listing all of these professions, these recognized professions. This is the counterpart to that. These are. It's a list of despised activities, if you will.
Yeah, the sponger, the thief.
Right. So we had that juxtaposition of the noble, the acknowledged, the celebrated, and then the despicable, that kind of thing. And they are the same value to women.
But he is being a little obscure here. So when he says this is the press of a bashful hand,
yes.
What does that refer to?
Well, I think it's basically, he says, this is the press of a bashful hand, this is the float and odor of hair, the touch of lips, etc. These are all of the moments and the individual phenomena that comprise a romantic encounter, if you will. I'm not really sure if it's saying that things are not what they seem. I'm not sure if I agree with that. I think he's just enumerating the different elements of a romantic encounter. On a sensory level.
Yeah. But the fact that he starts describing this romantic encounter right after he talks about the wicked being invited to this meal, I think kind of says something. He's saying,
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, so he shifts topics without warning.
Yeah, no, totally. I do agree with that.
So I think he's kind of saying these despised persons are worthy of romance.
I think I see what you mean. The comforts of romance and sexuality are open to the quote-unquote good and the quote-unquote wicked. But I'm still not sure what you mean by how that equates to things are not what they seem.
Yeah, I want to take that back.
Okay. I
want to take that back. I don't...
Well, it could refer to the fact that we only want to allot the good things to those we consider good.
Well, that was my only instance of the theme, things are not what they seem. But I thought he said that somewhere else, but I don't have it written down, so we're just going to have to move on.
Let's go to... I'm sorry, go ahead.
So, he likes the primitive religions and praises all religions. This is more of the iconoclasm.
Right, and I would like to point out, I think Walt Whitman is actually a prominent hero in the Unitarian Universalist movement.
Oh, is he?
I'm pretty sure whereby there is a certain value to all faiths and all religions.
Yeah. Okay, so here's section 41.
And again, I will say that in this we have yet another list.
Yeah.
But go ahead. You go ahead first.
Yeah. So he's buying drafts of Osiris, Isis, Belos, Brahma, Buddha in my portfolio, placing Manitolus, Allah on a leaf, the crucifix engraved, with Odin and the hideous face,
Mexitli. Mexitli.
Mexitli, and every idol and image. Okay. So he goes on and on. It's quite clear. He's praising other religions.
Now, this is also iconoclastic. If you refer to the Decalogue, if you refer to the commandment, do not worship graven images, not only is he worshiping graven images here, but he's consigning the Christian God as an image, as in the crucifix engraved.
Right.
Which would be, a really significant iconoclasm.
So why does he like these primitive religions? It's not all that obvious that...
Well, I think religion, you'll recall the comment I made on industry. Trying to fashion the world around somebody. Religion is, in fact, a form of industry. We're subjected to ideas, to changes.
No, I think it's more... Another theme that he's going to get into is he's against analysis. He's against... Sort of. I think he kind of contradicts himself on this, because he does quite clearly say, hurrah for positive science.
Right, he does say that.
But I think he contradicts himself. But there is a very strong theme of the body is equal, if not superior to the mind. Right. And because he's against analysis, and although he says he likes science, I kind of think he's more against it than not. Religion being the stereotypical alternative to science.
I wouldn't go that far. I'm not sure if I would. I'm going to make sure that's low.
Okay, so what were you saying?
I think that religion is just as much an industry as...
I don't subscribe to that.
No, I do. It's simply an attempt at transforming the world around oneself or understanding the world around oneself. It's an activity. It's a very vital, significant activity. And I think that's why he grants significance to that. Now, we said he likes primitive religions. That's also iconoclasm. Christianity, of course, is trying to suppress all these different religions, indigenous faiths, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think he likes primitive religions because the primitive times were more into the body.
Oh, I totally agree.
And he likes the body.
I totally agree.
All right. Okay, so let's move on. Let's move on to the nature theme. So it's very obvious that he likes nature, and I think he likes nature because the body is more natural than... Well, no, I don't want to say that. I was going to say the body's more natural than the mind, but no, I don't believe that.
I don't think he necessarily devalues mind. I think he devalues mind as being seen as idealized and separate from the body. I think he would say mind is one more aspect or facet of the body.
Okay, let's go ahead and skip ahead and look at let's deal with this.
Right.
That he's against analysis. Here's a very short one. 46, I know I have the best of time and space. It was never measured and never will be measured. I heard what was said of the universe, heard it of several thousand years. It is middling well as far as it goes, but is that all? Well, that's not very explicitly against analysis.
Right.
Oh, here's one.
Logic and sermons never convince, of course.
The damp of the night drives deeper into my soul. Okay.
Well, that to me sounds like a very mystical sentiment.
Yeah.
Moving beyond logic. Damp of the night, it reminds me of St. John of the Cross, for instance. The annihilation of distinction, analysis, that kind of thing.
Okay, so here, 26. Now I will do nothing but listen, to accrue what I hear into this song, to let sounds contribute toward it. And then he goes on, he's hearing sounds of birds, the angry bass of disjointed friendship, the steam whistle, the ring of alarm bells. Yeah, so he's not analyzing these things, he's just
taking them in.
Taking them in and experiencing them.
Right. I think what we're dealing with is absolute passivity here. When you analyze, you're forcing something upon whatever you're analyzing.
So here's 25, the very end of 25. I carry the plenum of proof and everything else in my face. Mm-hmm. With the hush of my lips, I wholly confound the skeptic. So he's saying that he can confound these people to do analysis.
Right.
And
writing... I'm sorry, go ahead.
And do proof. People who, proof is their main thing in life.
Writing and talk do not prove me. He does not have to make an effort to prove something. The very fact that he is proof enough.
Mm-hmm. Here's another one. I chant, section 21, I chant the chant of dilation or pride. We have had ducking and deprecating about enough. I show that size is only development. I really kind of think that when he says ducking and deprecating, he's referring to analysis, hair splitting.
Well, I think it's the... Yeah.
Here's another. So section 6. So a child says, what is the grass?
Yes.
And he does this very unserious analysis. You can tell that he's not too concerned with what grass is. He's only concerned with its sensual properties. Mm-hmm. So he makes 4 guesses. It must be the flag of my disposition.
Yes.
But this is clearly metaphorical. It is the handkerchief of the Lord. I guess that the grass is itself a child. I guess it is a uniform hieroglyphic. He doesn't really care about his answer. He doesn't really care about being accurate and truthful.
That's correct. He's not positing just one solution to one answer. You see, or I guess, or I guess, or I guess.
Yeah.
Exactly. But then he goes on and makes an interesting comment. And now it seems to me the beautiful uncut hair of graves.
Mm-hmm.
There's theory, and then death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So that pretty much establishes that he's against analysis.
Right.
So I kind of think that is related to his love of nature. He wants to enjoy nature, just look at it. He's not there to analyze it. He wants to enjoy its sensual properties. Let's also nature is divine.
Again, the pantheistic theme.
Okay. So let's see here.
Also, as another iconoclastic aspect, copulation is no more rank to me than death is.
I believe in the flesh and the appetite.
Right. What's interesting, because the valuation initially would be that death is this horrible thing, and copulation is the same, but by valuing death and then saying copulation is no more rank than death, these are in fact very good, very positive things. Death and sex and death.
Yeah. So in the 19th century, the view that sex was dirty,
of course,
was very prevalent, even still today.
It's almost like it's like he's using the same words, but the sentiment is entirely flipped.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I definitely should have put those lines under the heading sensuality. So that, it does tie into sensuality. But here he says, seeing, hearing, feeling are miracles, and each part and tag of me is a miracle.
Recall the lines we just discussed: the press of the hand, the press of the lover's hand, the smell of the hair, for instance. It's that same sentiment.
Yeah. Divine am I inside and out, and I make holy whatever I touch or am touched from.
Right, divine inside and out. This includes the viscera. This includes feces, all sorts of things like that.
Yeah, the scent of these armpits. This head more than churches, Bibles, and all the creeds. So the head is more divine.
Correct.
Than the churches. Nature is divine. Okay.
Now this is interesting. If I worship one thing more than another, it should be the spread of my own body or any part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I take that to mean production effectiveness, sexuality, sensuously interacting with another human being, spreading the body.
Right. And by the way, we're in section 24.
Okay.
And this also is some great poetry here, because he has each line ending with "it shall be you." So, translucent mold of me, it shall be you. Shaded ledges and rests, it shall be you. Firm, masculine coulter, it shall be you.
These are all parts of the body that he is worshipping in turn.
Yeah. Okay.
Now this is interesting. You, my rich blood, your milky stream pale strippings of my life. Could that be breast milk? It says, or could that also imply seminal fluid as well?
I kind of think it is seminal fluid.
Yeah.
This is the offspring he never had.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, I love this though. My brain, it shall be your occult convolutions. That's very nice.
That's great. That's great poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. I think we've established that he likes nature, that it is divine. We've already done the noble savage part.
Yes.
So let's move on to sensuality. That's the other big theme.
Okay.
So physical activity is good. This is a sub-theme. Physical activity is good. Okay, so we're in section 42. So...
And again, this goes back to all of these activities, the butcher's activity, the blacksmith's activity, etc.
Yes, ever the hard unsunk ground, ever the eaters and drinkers, ever the upward and downward sun, ever the air in the ceaseless tides. And by the way, there's no verb here, so what do you think the verb is that he's...
Let's see. Ever love,
ever the sobbing...
Ever praised, perhaps? Or praiseworthy? Praiseworthy, of course, is not a verb, but ever laudable? Ever laudable love, ever laudable the sobbing liquid of life, ever laudable myself and my neighbors. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I would pretty much go with that.
Okay.
Okay. So there's a lot of physical activity going on in this passage.
And again, another listing of occupations, banks, of activities, banks, tariffs, steamships, etc.
So the vexer's hoot. Sobbing, well, we already did that. Okay. All right, so let's do another one. Physical activity is good. So here's section 37. Askers embody themselves in me, and I am embodied in them. Well, that kind of goes back to is contained, and he contains everything.
Right.
I don't think this is a good example.
Well, I like this. So, for example, not a cholera patient lies in the last gasp, but I also lie in the last gasp. My face is ash-colored, my sinews gnarl. Away from the people. Again, he's just going into the sanctity, the holiness of all experiences, I think.
All right.